SPC is a polymetallic copper, nickel, and PGM exploration company with its flagship copper-focused Muskox Project in Nunavut and the Lockerby East project in the Sudbury Basin Mining Camp. CEO Grant Moore is here to discuss the exploration plans for both of these projects. It's June 24th. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. Please remember this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Grant, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Martin.
All right. Well, great to have you. What I like about your story is, well, the header SPC Nickel is a little bit of a misnomer. With you've got a lot of copper focus, which is a favorite of mine, especially in your Nunavut project. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the copper focus on your projects going forward here. So thanks for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks. So I think today I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to two of our projects, that being our Muskox project up in Nunavut and our Lockerby East project in Sudbury, and also touch on what Martin had kind of mentioned about the polymetallic nature of these deposits and why they're not just nickel projects, they're actually copper, nickel, precious metal projects. So your classic disclaimer, probably will be making some forward-looking statements, so make sure you do your homework. And so as we've mentioned, SPC, which started probably 3 or 4 years ago as a publicly listed company, we have two main assets. They're in the same commodity space, but at different ends of the spectrum. We have the more advanced Lockerby East property, which is located in the Sudbury Mining Camp. That project has compliant recent 43101 open pittable resources, as well as underground resources through a past producing underground mine, and then has blue sky opportunities to make a new polymetallic discovery within the world-class Sudbury Mining Camp. And the project that is a much larger district scale opportunity as our Muskox project in Nunavut. This is one that I'm really excited about from the possibility of what this project could be. It's a big project. SPC controls over 470 square kilometers. The intrusion that we're targeting, called the Muskox, is over 125 kilometers long. So it's a big intrusion. And from a geology point of view, what we really like about the area is that it has lots of similarities to many of the world's largest polymetallic deposits. So Norilsk Talnak in Russia, Sudbury in Ontario, and the Voisey's Bay deposit in eastern Canada. So, that is the key, is that we see lots of characteristics of these big deposits. So it's a really good spot to be starting. The other thing is it hasn't been looked at for the past 15 to 20 years. It's been neglected due mainly to its location. So we see lots of potential to apply new tools, new methodology to make a discovery there. And it's always, you can have all that, but you really need to know that the system can produce the mineralization that you want to see. So we have some historic drill intersections that really do hint at the potential of the project, that you see these really nice high-grade polymetallic mineralization. And that'll be kind of the theme throughout the presentation. Although our title has nickel in it, and nickel is not necessarily in favor right now, we're really focused on polymetallic deposits. And why investors should be looking at companies that are exploring for this is that you just have to look at the examples. I mean, these are big deposits. You have Norilsk, Sudbury, Voisey's Bay. Norilsk is considered the largest nickel sulfide deposit in the world, and probably 5th or 6th in copper resource, but it's actually a 2-to-1 copper to nickel ratio. And if you look at Norilsk just on a copper equivalence basis, it's the largest deposit and the largest copper deposit in the world. It's bigger than the copper porphyries in South America. And on reserves and resources alone, it's a 1.5 to 2 trillion ton deposit. So these are, there's multiple deposits there, but it just shows you at the potential that these big systems can have. And that's why we were attracted to the muskox and to that area, and why we're focusing on these polymetallic deposits. As the name suggests, they're built-in hedges across the commodity cycle. I mean, right now nickel is down, but copper's up, platinum's up, palladium's up, gold's up, and silver's up. So they have a tendency to balance out. They contain the strategic and critical metals that the world's looking for. So every ton of rock that comes out of the ground has all the strategic and critical metals that countries are looking for. And probably most importantly is that they're worth a lot. I mean, there's a high value per ton for every ton of ore in the ground. And ultimately, this business is about making money. And so when you start with something that's got a lot of value per ton, it just gives you a lot of optionality when it comes to exploration, development, and expansion, and just is a really good place to start. So, we had our kind of basis in Sudbury. We were looking elsewhere in Canada for opportunities that kind of fit into that same realm, into the polymetallic nature that have big upside. So we looked at characteristics that we saw in some of the big deposits around the world, and we really ended up looking in Nunavut at the Muskox intrusion. And that was namely because we saw a lot of the same characteristics. B, it was available for us to stake, so a low cost entry point. And Nunavut is really becoming in my opinion, the next frontier for mineral exploration in Canada. And I think in the coming years, you'll see a big ramp up of activity in Nunavut. So we were able to get in there early. This is basically just a map of the Muskox intrusion. And I should point out that the map on the right goes actually underneath the map on the left. So from top to bottom, that's about 125 to 130 kilometers in strike length.
So sorry, Sir Grant. So on the map, that bottom part where the sort of V-shaped areas, that plugs into the bottom, the top of the right one plugs to the bottom of the left one.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. And the Muskox intrusion is made up of two parts. On the left, you have what would be considered the main Muskox intrusion. And sorry, I got that backwards. On the left, you see that. On the right side is what's called the feeder dike. And these two things are connected, geologically connected, and they're related to this large magmatic event. Without getting into too many of the details, it's a similar sort of geological environment to what you see at Norilsk. The mineralization is usually within these marginal orange-looking rocks. And as someone who's been from one end to the other in this, I can say that there's high-grade massive sulfide over the entire length of this intrusion, not continuous, in discontinuous in nature, but nevertheless high-grade copper, nickel, and PG mineralization. So this project is located in the western part of Nunavut called the Cu-Ni-PGM, and we're about 70 to 75 kilometers from the Arctic coast, where there's a small community that we base our operations out of. We were able, through staking and an option agreement, put together basically all of the ground that is available for staking we have in SPC, and that's the 470 square kilometers that you see there. And the project is fully permitted right now for drilling, camps, and all exploration activities through the Nunavut government, the Inuit associations, and through the federal government as well. This is a bit of a block model slice of the main intrusion, and just a little bit about it. It's kind of a funnel-shaped intrusion. This would be looking towards the north, and also what's not included in this map would be the feeder dike that would extend about 60 kilometers to the south. Originally, this was found by Inco back in the 50s, and they were doing recce work up in Nunavut, and looking for basically gaussons on surface. And up here, you can find sulfide gaussons that extend for tens of kilometers along the margin of the intrusion, and that's what got Inco interested in the area. And they did work there for a few years until they found the Thompson nickel belt and basically moved their activities to Thompson. This is one of the largest and most unexplored copper nickel systems that I know of. It's big, as I mentioned, about 125 kilometers from north to south. The feeder dike in the south is around 200 to 600 meters wide, and the main intrusion gets up to about 11 kilometers in width at its maximum. Other than also having a lot of the, being in a similar geological environment as some of the other big deposits around the world, there's also multiple different mineralized environments within these Muskox intrusion. You have here higher up in the main intrusion, you have what are stratiform Cu-Ni-PGM copper reefs, so something that you'd see in the Bushveld or the Stillwater complex. I've seen these, and they're dead ringers for them. They're chromite-bearing PG reefs that run up to 4, 5, 6 grams of precious metals. You have contact footwall mineralization along the edges of the intrusion. This is usually copper, nickel, precious metal rich, and this is very similar to what you see in Sudbury and in Norilsk. And you also get, in addition to the contact mineralization, you also get footwall mineralization, which is usually copper-rich, massive chalcopyrite veins that have multiple ounces of precious metals in the footwall. A newer zone that really hasn't seen as much work would be what's called the keel zone, and that is the area where the feeder dike connects with the main intrusion, and that extends all the way along the base of this main intrusion. So it has a strike length of about 40 kilometers, and that would be, we feel, equivalent to something like the ovoid deposit at Voisey's Bay. And then you also have the feeder dike, which extends underneath the main intrusion and also 60 kilometers to the south. So it's 100 kilometers in total length. And that would be similar to something that you see in Sudbury and also Voisey's Bay. And all of these zones have the potential to produce massive sulfide. And in fact, you can find massive sulfide associated with all these environments on surface. Just some examples without going into too much details, but this is some on the right side is just a picture of what the gossans look like on surface. Hopefully it's not too difficult to see, but that's basically sulfide gossans along the edge of the intrusion, and that's what got people interested in this project in the first place. This photo is you probably have 2 or 3 kilometers in vision along that photo, but it goes for another 10 to 20 kilometers, these gossans along the edge. And this is along the contact style of mineralization. And I've included some of the past drill intersections dating back to the work done by Inco in the 50s and most recently in 2007. So you can have all the right geology, but you have to be confident that the system can produce the grades of mineralization that you need. And especially up here, you need high-grade mineralization. And these are some selective high-grade intervals that demonstrate that this system has the potential to produce really high-grade mineralization. It's about 2 or 3 to 1 copper to nickel, and very high in precious metals, where you get multiple ounces of PGs, usually palladium dominant, but very high grade. And the one thing to take away from these is that all these intersections are basically above 100 meters. So most of the work that's been done on this intrusion is very shallow in the top 100 meters.
Do you think there's potential for deeper mineralization as well?
Yeah, certainly. That's where we think the big opportunity really exists at depth. And most of the work that's been done here, every time there's a cycle in nickel, someone comes back in and does some work. And they have a tendency to end up by doing the same work over and over again, where they re-drill old holes, they resample old showings, and they get drawn in by these big gossans. And it's pretty hard not to, but rarely has any of the work actually started to venture out from the edges in the shallow depths. And I think that's where the big opportunity exists. This is just kind of a block model cartoon section of part of the main intrusion, showing some of the different geological environments that we think have potential for mineralization. This would be looking to the south. You can see the scale, that's about 33 kilometers. There is the basal contact and footwall mineralization, so that's along the edges of the intrusion. And on here we have surface grab samples put in just to give you some idea And these are all in copper equivalent grade. So very high grade mineralization at surface. And to put things in the comparison, on the property that we have, we estimate that the intrusion goes down to about 1,200, 1,300 meters depth at max. If you take that surface area of that intrusion and compare it to something like Sudbury, it's equivalent to taking the entire Sudbury Basin down to a kilometer, is the same potential size that exists within this Muskox intrusion. And, we know in Sudbury, in that sort of top kilometer, there's hundreds of millions of tons of mineralization that has been mined and developed. The keel zone, which is where the feeder dike and the main intrusion meet down at the bottom, that extends for 40 kilometers. And that's been virtually, that's kind of the last or the newest area that was started to look at in 2005 and 2006, before exploration stopped. And that's equivalent to something like the Ovoid in Voisey's Bay. That Voisey's Bay was being advanced at that same time. So a lot of the understanding from there was translated into this project. And there's some really interesting results, but that's when basically the work ended. The feeder dike, as I mentioned, it extends all the way underneath this intrusion and continues for a further 60 kilometers to the south. There's massive sulfide on surface along that entire exposed 60 kilometers of the dike, and there's 2 100-meter drill holes on with no modern geophysics. So it's wide open for discovery. All these environments demonstrate the potential to host massive sulfide. And we think that the opportunity for us lies in the scale, as I've just mentioned. It's huge, and sometimes it seems like it's maybe too big, but it's certainly not going to be a project where you have one target to test and that's it. It is a big project. The idea that you can apply new geological models to it, I think, is a really exciting opportunity. The last time this property was seriously worked was around 2005. So we're talking 20 years ago. 2005. And a lot has changed since then. A lot of changes to geological models, where you look. The discovery at Voisey's Bay showed that you actually want to start looking deeper down within the plumbing system of these large intrusions. And a big advantage for us is that we have a proprietary database that contains most of the geological and geophysical data going back to the 50s. So this is raw geophysical data. Again, over 20, 30-year time period, a lot has changed with geophysical techniques, new post-processing capabilities, 3D modeling. So the idea of taking and reevaluating old geophysical data with new collected geophysical data presents a really big opportunity. And just as an example, this is some of the last work that was done in 2006 and 7. I mean, there's been nothing else since then. This is just showing a slice through the intrusion. This is to the south. You can see grab samples on surface. And the last company was in there following up on advancements at Voisey's Bay, started to do something called controlled source AMT as a way to kind of image the deeper part of the intrusion. And this is just some of the data that's within the historical data that we have that clearly shows that you can image the intrusion, but you can also image the feeder dike coming into the intrusion. And where these things meet, that represents I think one of the #1 targets on this property, and that extends for 40 kilometers. Since this work was done in 2005, significant advancements have happened in this sort of survey. So there's a lot of opportunities to apply new geophysical, new techniques, and new geological models to make discoveries.
Grant, the star by the keel zone target, roughly how deep would that be?
In this case, that would be around 700 meters.
Okay.
But this extends all the way to the south, where it's within 100 meters of surface. So, we just kind of, to wrap it up a little bit on this project, these were some of the criteria that we took when we were looking for our next kind of project area. And we looked at Norilsk, Voisey's Bay, and Sudbury, took some things away that we thought were important. And when we started to dig into the muskox, we see that we've got all those characteristics. You know, that doesn't mean there's going to be a deposit there, but it's a really good place to start when you've got a lot of the geological characteristics that you want to see. And, you know, the one thing about these deposits that we've got used as examples that they're all big. You know, they're all 100+ million to 1 billion ton deposits. And muskox really does have that potential. If we can kind of crack the nut and understand how to explore and where to look in this intrusion, I mean, the potential is that we could find the next kind of polymetallic camp in Canada. It's got that sort of size potential. So what's next? We're kind of looking at a 4-year plan, and this ties into why we did the rights offering financing that's underway right now. Is we wanted to get a field season in this year. You know, we're going to be looking at generating targets through a focused and methodical exploration approach. We're not just going to jump in and start drilling holes. We want to make sure that we've defined the targets as best as we can, because really the goal is to make a discovery, not just to get a drill intersection. So it may be a little slow and steady, but we want to make sure that we're doing the right work and developing our targets. We plan to be doing airborne geophysics this year. We've already signed 1 contract and hope to have another one signed this week. That'll be resulting, you know, the hopes of that was that we'll be generating some really high quality geophysical targets. Next year, we'll follow that up with groundwork in developing the camps and hopefully get some drilling in next year. And that's where the discovery opportunity really comes into play. And over the next couple of years after that, we would look to do additional drilling. You know, hopefully at that point we've you know, got the tiger by the tail and we're you know, advancing along a discovery path. So we'll shift gears a bit and just talk about Sudbury. I think probably a lot of people on the call are familiar with Sudbury. That's the Sudbury Basin. You know, the deposits all sit around the edge. We have one main asset in Sudbury called Lockerby East property, and that's down here in the southwest corner, which is a pretty active part of the basin right now. So zooming in, our property is over here in the little blue box. That's the Lockerby East property, but it's right next door to the old Lockerby mine, which was a Falconbridge and First Nickel mine that produced almost 10 million tons of nickel copper mineralization. And then just a couple kilometers to the west is the Crean Hill project that is owned and operated by Magna Mining, who have become the next big player in Sudbury. And that's a really nice kind of high grade copper nickel PG deposit that they're advancing. So again, Sudbury, known as a nickel camp, in fact produces more copper than nickel on a yearly basis. And these deposits commonly have a lot of precious metals attached to them. So the Lockerby East property hosts 2 deposits, one called the West Graham deposit. That's a large lower grade deposit right at surface, so something that would be looked at through an open pit and that we've been advancing for the last couple of years. And then at depth, there's what's called the LKE deposit. And part of that deposit was actually mined underground from the Lockerby headframe situated right here. And there is a compliant resource with that, with the blue sky exploration opportunities down dip of that. So we, you know, and people may recall the history, we signed a consolidation agreement with Vale back in 2023, where we put this West Graham deposit together. It used to be separated into 2 properties, ours and a property that Vale had. So we've combined that into one. Since then, we did about 17,000 meters of drilling and just over 100 holes. And within that year, we put out our maiden resource for the West Graham deposit. And that's down there on the bottom left. You know, the large in-pit resource stands at about 22 million tons. And then the out-of-pit resource, which is everything outside of this black line, is about 7 million tons. I should point out that our agreement with Vale is down to a vertical, it has a depth constraint, so it's down to a depth of 550 meters. Everything below that is 100% SPC. And you can just make out at the bottom of the slide, that's the historic underground workings of the LKE deposit that was partially mined by Falconbridge. So this is a large mineral system. It's just not the open pit or near surface mineralization. The mineralization extends from surface down dip for over 13 to 1400 meters as a fairly continuous sheet. At the surface, it's much thicker but lower grade, and as you go deeper, the deposit gets narrower but higher grade. Copper and nickel values increase with depth, and so do the precious metal values increase with depth. So down here at depth is what we call the LKE resource, and you can see that the portion that was mined out by Falconbridge. And there was a lot of high-grade mineralization in this deposit. Currently the resource is only about 800,000 tons that's left, but there is some really spectacular drill intersections that hint at the potential. 10 meters of 5.6% nickel and 1.3% copper and almost a gram of precious metals. So as you go deeper, the grades get better, the precious metals get higher, and so does the copper get higher. And this just zooms out a little bit more. We did do some geophysical work on some old drill holes at depth, and that's where we think the blue sky opportunity to find a new standalone deposit exists. These kind of purple plates here are geophysical conductors that are very high conductivity. They're, in Sudbury, these are massive sulfide. It's just a question of how thick that massive sulfide is. But this is over 1,000 meters of strike length dip extent, where we have these very high conductivity geophysical targets that we hope to test this year after these rights offering closes. But just to give you some potential, if we were to zoom out a little bit further, the old Lockerby mine would be to the right of the page, and this sort of zone has kind of that 5 to 6 million ton potential, is what kind of our target area is.
Would you, drilling that area, would you be drilling that from the surface, or the mine shafts and that underground, are they still open and you could drill from there?
No, so they're not accessible.
Okay.
Now they are in kind of a big picture sense. If you were to develop and find a significant resource there, you would certainly consider reestablishing that underground infrastructure and using that to get yourself there a lot quicker.
All right.
Any drilling that we do would be using old existing holes in the area and doing what's called wedge cuts off those holes, so you can reduce the amount of drilling you have to do.
Gotcha.
So looking at these two projects, kind of what's next at the LKE, we hope to drill a couple of the deeper targets this year, and this is has huge potential for discovering something new on this property, a new kind of standalone deposit, and that we'll do some work this year, and hopefully in the years in the next kind of 2 to 3 years after, we would just continue to do drilling on building up a resource at depth. So that's a lot of kind of really good discovery stage work that would be done on that project over the next couple of years. West Graham, we are still moving that project ahead. It's a project that we still believe in. We feel like that there is still an economic deposit there, in particular, given our close proximity to infrastructure, the fact that it's at surface, it would have a low capex to start, and there's a couple mills in Sudbury that are very hungry for ore, and this fits in well to that sort of supply chain that is needed. So we're advancing the project through studies that are ongoing, and in order to keep moving the project ahead, you have to do the have to do the study work that is not necessarily that glamorous, but it allows you to keep moving the project ahead through to a pre-feasibility and ultimately a feasibility study a couple years down the road, where we'll learn 100% of the project, and then we'll be at that decision of pulling the trigger on a production sort of scenario. And hopefully at that that point we've seen, a bit of a rebound in the nickel market, which I think is forecasted for a few years down the road, and that should be really good timing for us.
With the West Graham, do you have any more exploration work to do or drilling, or that's pretty much done and it's the studies to do?
Yeah, you know what, at some point you have to kind of call the drilling off, like not call it off. There's only so much you can do. And I mean, we could probably keep drilling for another couple of years there, but we want to keep moving the project forward. So we've kind of looked at the top couple 100 meters of the deposit where we think we would, the portion of the deposit that would be mined first, and that's what we focused on, is drilling that. We don't have to do any more drilling to move it to a feasibility stage. Obviously, if we want to expand that, we would have to do some more drilling. So this is our cap structure right now as it stands. Just about 191 million shares, around $1 million in the bank. Our largest shareholder right now is Dundee. They own about just over 18% of SPC and have been a very strong supporter of the company since it went public. As most people online will know, we just announced a few weeks ago a $3.5 million rights offering where Dundee will act as the backstop for that financing. So this sort of financing is a little bit unique, and it's not something that's done all the time. This gives every existing shareholder, as of the end of today, actually, the opportunity to participate in this financing. So if you own a share in SPC, you will be, you'll have the opportunity to exercise your rights in this to purchase another share, or it's at about a 90% of the shareholder position at 2 cents, with the total proceeds being $3.5 million. Any shares that aren't any rights that aren't exercised by the shareholders, Dundee will be purchasing those shares. So they essentially backstop. And we had looked at a lot of different financing options on the table. We really wanted to get a field season in this year at Muskox, and we found that the traditional routes of financing were just not going to work in a time frame that we needed. And the nice thing about this rights offering is, as soon as it's announced, it's almost like a bought deal that the money is guaranteed to come in, because that's why you have the backstop. So that's allowed us to sign contracts to get geophysical work done at Muskox. And we're bringing in we have the backstop from our larger shareholder, who's been the #1 supporter of this company. And I think their involvement into this just reaffirms how they view these projects. They like the projects that SPC have, in particular the Muskox project, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, and helping us moving forward.
All right. Well, I personally really like rights offerings. I don't think they're used enough, because it treats all the shareholders the same way. There's dilution, but you get a chance to put up and not be diluted, although at a cost. And then the fact that Dundee is backstopping it is great. It's like almost like a bought deal. You got the cash.
I think the challenge is always to have that backstop.
Yeah.
And
not
in our
many
case,
get that.
In our case, having our someone like Dundee, who's got a really solid reputation and is in this business to make discoveries and build mines, was the thing that got us convinced that this was probably the best route to go.
Yeah, and they're typically not so expensive. You don't have commissions to pay. It's just
there's certainly probably a little bit more paperwork, but
okay.
the nice thing, like I said, is once you've announced it, you can move ahead.
I guess going to Nunavut, the Muskox. You mentioned this yourself. Like this year, I guess, is all about doing the big, call it macro work. You're doing the geophysics and so forth. Like you almost have a too much, or you've got a lot of. You really got to do a lot of work to whittle down where to go. You can't just go willy-nilly, call it, and punch a few holes in there. You've really got to get a big scope on the picture. Can you just focus in a little more on the process of determining where you're gonna punch in those first holes, and that those first holes, I believe, would be next year according to the current plan?
Yeah, the hope would be to have those towards the end of next year.
Yeah. So, and any more on how you'll be evaluating it, or your process in the evaluation? Obviously, you have to run some of the work first, but any insight into how you want to interpret or what you're looking for?
Yeah, so I would comment by saying that, most of the previous companies that have been in there, when I look at it, I do think that they were probably rushed and they didn't necessarily take the time to really develop the targets, because they wanted and needed that intersection to keep the program moving ahead. And our view is, like you said, you do the big picture geophysical work right now. So that's airborne surveys. It's logistically a lot easier. You don't need a camp. You can cover a lot of ground in a day with a helicopter. From that, you develop kind of, I would say, coarse targets. And you may have, with EM, you may have distinct geophysical targets, but you're kind of going to start to develop areas that you think look prospective based on the geophysical data that you've collected, plus all of this historical data that we have. And then in year 2, you would narrow that down or define that better by using more focused ground geophysics. And that's going to develop your, take your, hopefully, which is maybe a target that's a kilometer or 2 in size, and get it down to where it's a drillable target. Maybe it's a 500 meters or something like that. And that would be the process: is start big to end up with a well-defined target. And you're probably doing that in multiple areas.
Yeah. And also, I think sometimes companies have an issue of, they know, well, we can get some sexy holes here, but it maybe doesn't. It's small and doesn't really show a big picture, where you have to sometimes put some work in doing really Sherlock Holming it, and trying to figure out some things. You may not get sexy stuff, but it really adds to the knowledge base. Is that fair to say? And
well, I would say that anyone who, over the last year or so, that pays attention to the markets, knows that that's become a very common thing, is to issue, drill right down the middle, down plunge of a mineralized zone, and put out a great intersection, twin an old hole, step out 5 meters. Like I said, we're not in this for just a drill intersection. Our objective is to make a world-class discovery, and that is going to take some time, and you have to be a little bit methodical about it. But that's the ultimate goal, is not just to have one intersection and then a one and done. We want to be here for a long haul. We want to find something really significant, and the property has all the characteristics that you want to see. You just have to get to work, and and synthesize from the big down to the small. And I think if you do it correctly, you can be successful. But if you kind of jump a couple steps and go and just drill an old showing or twin an old hole, like some of the old Inco holes have been twinned about 10 times. And ultimately it hasn't ended up in anything other than a lot of drilling in one spot. So that's the approach we're taking. I mean, that can all accelerate very quickly with one intersection that you
Yes.
believe you've got the tip of something big, you can do a 180 very quickly and accelerate your program. But as we've got it laid out now, is we're taking that somewhat of a slow, steady approach.
All right. And obviously, Dundee seems to, they're supporting you now. They're supporting this plan of the slow, steady approach to this as opposed to the rushed strategy.
Yep. Yeah. They're supportive of it. And obviously, like I said, if we have the indications that we've got the, if we do these geophysical surveys and an anomaly lights up that is hard to deny what it is, then I'm sure we will be accelerating things to test that.
As we've said, it is a large land package here. What kind of commitments do you need to do to the Nunavut government or other authorities to maintain the land? Is there an annual spend or amount of work put in? Is it expensive land to keep?
Relative to, I'm based in Ontario. It's not, the annual, I think the property as a whole probably requires around $100,000 to $150,000 of work every year to be done on it.
Yeah.
But working in Nunavut is, although infrastructure is a challenge, it does have lots of benefits. There's the land settlement, or issues of land ownership are not an issue because the land has been settled between the government and the Inuit. So exactly what is Inuit owned land, what is Crown land, and what you have to do on both. We've had no issues in the past getting permits. I find at least that the different Inuit jurisdictions, in our case, the Kitikmeot region, are very pro-mining and see that as a way to develop infrastructure in the north. So, I know there's certainly in some places in Ontario, there's been challenges getting projects done in the north. I don't see the same. You certainly will have some challenges at some point, but I think there's a lot of benefits for working in Nunavut.
Yeah. Well, and if you're not spending 100 or 125 grand a year, what's the point of holding those projects? You better be spending that money up there.
Well, and that ties into why we have initiated this rights offering, as that's what we were doing before. And although it was interesting, and every time we went up and came back, we felt like, man, we got to get doing some more work. We were focused on Sudbury, and that's where our resources went. So we're seeing that shift in interest level in projects to more copper dominated projects, and Muskox really fits that right now.
All right. On Muskox, have you located the old drill holes? Is there any opportunity to do borehole EM on them?
Certainly, we have found lots of drill holes. Yes, a lot of the drill core is still out there. So there's an opportunity to look at that. The challenge with going back down, you could resurvey the holes, but you'd probably have to have a drill on site because of the permafrost. They would probably close up or be iced over. So you'd need to open the holes up, but that's certainly an option. If you had a drill up there, you could certainly clean out old holes and do geophysical surveys.
With the $3.5 million you're raising now, how far does that take you? Does that essentially take you through this summer's work program, and then you have to reload next springtime to do next year's program?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Is the money that we're going to raise through this financing will get the work we want to do done at Muskox this year. It'll get the work that we have planned in Sudbury done, and we're hoping at that point we have a lot of really exciting news, and our share price has responded, and then we can look to fill up the coffers again in either towards the end of the year or into the new year of 2026.
Yeah. And I guess Muskox is summer only work for the most part, while Sudbury is largely year round, I guess.
Yeah, so that was, yeah, Muskox is, once you have a camp established, your window expands quite a bit.
Yeah.
But without that, you're kind of looking at a June, June, July, August, in September, maybe a little bit of May. So
Yeah.
you got 3 months to kind of get busy, and that's what we're focusing on right now. The projects in Sudbury, I mean, you can drive your car to them, so they're
Yeah.
available to do work year round. So we're kind of going to push that stuff back to the fall, and focus on the muskox while the sun's shining.
Can you remind us of the catalyst timeline again? Will you be sequentially advancing Muskox and Sudbury projects, or are they, since it's summertime, are you going to be working on Muskox first and then sort of putting your focus to Sudbury where you can work year round there?
Yeah, so muskox will be right now. So
Yeah.
for the rest of June, July, August is when we're going to be focused on muskox, and then I would say September, October is when we will shift to the Sudbury stuff. Now the studies and things like that for West Grand, they're ongoing
Yeah.
year round, because that's primarily consultant sort of work.
With, let's say, on the muskox, what would be, what kind of, are we gonna have to wait till the after your season up there to get some data, or are you going to be able to release some intermittent data until that point, so we kind of get a sense of what kind of progress you're making?
Yeah, I hope to have, I mean, in a perfect scenario, we would look to release the results of the 2 surveys we are hoping to do. Like I said, we have signed a contract for one and hoping to sign the other one right now. Then we're also going to have our own field program, so we would look to get information out as soon as we have it.
So in muskox, you're doing the are you actually getting boots on the ground doing some sampling and that on the ground this year, or is that going to be for next year?
Well, we hope to have a small program, follow-up program after the geophysical surveys are done.
Gotcha.
Ideally,
You get some.
ideally, you like to fly the surveys, and then you like to go out and ground truth any sort of anomalies that come from it.
Yeah.
The challenge in the north right now is availability of helicopters. There's a lot of companies active. In fact, the area to the north of the Muskox project, all related to the same sort of event, is very active for copper silver mineralization. There's a number of Australian listed companies that are active. There's companies to the east of us that are active for copper mineralization. To the west of us is uranium exploration. So there's a lot going on, and securing helicopters and geophysical companies is a challenge, but we're hoping we'll get everyone locked up here shortly.
And you'll be updating the market in terms of news releases, any videos or anything, or any other sort of multimedia stuff to keep people up to date?
We're going to try to be a lot more active than we were in the past. And that's a benefit of having this financing, or getting this financing done, is it allows us to plan out a lot further than we were able to before. And hopefully we have a nice steady flow of news, do a lot more engaged on the marketing front, and conveying to our shareholders what we're doing and why SPC is an interesting story to watch in 2025.
We've covered a lot of territory here. We need to wrap it up. We're approaching an hour here. Any final thoughts or comments to leave viewers with before we call it a day?
Yeah, I would just say that we've got a lot going on this year. We've got our West Grand project that's still moving ahead, and I still think is a great project and has that potential to become a cash flow producer for Sudbury sorry, for SPC down the road. And, you know, as someone who's spent most of their career in kind of polymetallic deposits, you know, I think the Muskox is one of the best exploration projects that I've seen.
Yeah.
And the upside is enormous. And then if you look at Sudbury, you know, there's not a better place in the world to make a nickel copper PG discovery than in Sudbury. So to have that,
Yep.
to have all those three things in a company like ours going on at the same time, represents a pretty exciting story, I think.
Grant, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Looking forward to getting some updates as you move the ball forward here on your multiple projects. Have a great day and talk to you again soon.
Thank you.